Well, I mean, it was just a terrible set of facts. That was one side of the, I mean, there was this tension during the case. You got this horrible set of facts that, frankly, if there was a case designed for the death penalty, it was probably this one. You know what the facts are. He brutally beat to death a number of children with a lead pipe and sexually assaulted one of, well, knocked the top of one of them's, this teenage girl's head off, and then sexually assaulted her with the pipe and with himself. And it was just a horrible, horrible set of facts. On the other side of the equation, though, was a severely disturbed young man. James was just a sick, sick puppy. He had a stack of mental health records probably close to 2 feet tall, at least a foot to 2 foot in height, and it had numerous commitments to the state hospital. He clearly had mental problems, and his family, his grandmother called her Big Mama. She was one of those. She was the real driving force in that family. She was the strength of that family. James's mother, she had her own problems, her own mental problems, and it was pretty clear to Andy and me that James came by his own problems, honestly, from his mother. But sitting in their home, you know, and getting to know that family and trying to learn as much as we could about James and reading those medical records, those mental health records, you just really in your mind question is it the right thing to kill a human being like this? And then at the same time, you know, you've got, I had my long time, you know, personal religious beliefs that were kind of tugging at me too. So just a combination of those things led me to believe very firmly that I don't think the death penalty is the right thing.
Could you tell us about those religious tugs?
Simple. It's just, you know, I was born and raised and am a devout Catholic today, and the 10 Commandments, you know, one of the commandments just says, "Thou shalt not kill." And there's not a footnote there that says that, well, you can if the, you know, legislature says, you know, passes a statute that says you can. I understand the concept of self-defense. I understand there are circumstances where we as human beings, I think, are forgiven if we do kill. But it's in those situations where we don't have a great deal of time to reflect and we act instinctively. Executing somebody is not an instinctive event. You know, it's something that the state spends years working up to with an individual, and I just don't believe there's any way to rationalize the death penalty with the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill."
What were you gonna?
No.
What do you remember about the actual James and his mother and grandmother? You alluded to some, you know, problems in that family.
Well, James was, I mean, he really was crazy as a shithouse rat. I mean, and we knew it when we go visit him. And we filed a notice of intent to raise the insanity defense, and we hired experts to go visit with him. And they all agreed he's severely disturbed, but we never could get over that threshold that's required to prove insanity, you know, for purposes of the criminal law. So we just could not show that he was insane. Now, trying to have a conversation with James was fruitless. I mean, he really was a nut. Trying to have a conversation with his mother was worthless. You could tell she had problems. Big Mama, his grandmother, we could communicate with her, and she told us about how he was brought up, and he was, as I recall, and it's been a long time, but he was, as I recall, abused by his father, physically abused, and growing up with a mentally ill mother, an abusive father, you don't have much of a chance, frankly.
Do you think James knew what was going on when he talked with you and Andy?
Yeah, he knew why we were there, and he could talk about what happened, and he told us his version of what happened, and that was the problem with the insanity defense, is he had a rational understanding of what he did. He could relate to us, and did relate to us, what happened. He might fudge here and there some of the really, really embarrassing stuff. Him having sex with a dead girl, or with a girl at least, if she wasn't dead at that moment, was in the throes of death with her brains literally hanging out. He would not admit to that. And we didn't lean on him to admit to it. We knew what the facts were. So, yeah, I mean, he could communicate with us.
Given those facts, what was your strategy in the trial?
It was to try to generate some sympathy, enough sympathy regarding his background and his mental health history, to where the jury would just feel like it's just not fair to give this guy the death penalty. Now, the law has changed since then. Today, I'm not sure legally they could execute James today. Certainly, the jury charge that they would get today is different than he would have gotten back then, and the jury would have been given a little more effective mechanism or effective way to, even though they believed he was guilty, and even though they believed he presented a danger to the community, there's now a charge that says, in light of all that, if you think there are things in this person's past that would mitigate to the degree where the death penalty just isn't fair, then you don't have to give it. We didn't have the advantage of that jury charge back then.
Did you get a sense of what the jury was thinking, both either during the trial or afterwards?
I think they were thinking that we agree that he is one unfortunate, sick, sympathetic human being, but he is clearly a danger to this community, and we don't ever want to run the risk of him doing something to somebody in prison, or heaven forbid on the outside of prison. That's the downside to emphasizing a mental health defense, is that's one of those things that can cut two ways. On the one hand, it can generate some sympathy, but on the other hand, it shows whoever's listening to it that, woo, this guy is spooky. He's dangerous, and not only is he just mean, but he's a psycho, and psycho scares people.